There's this trending topic on YouTube that I actually really dislike in the credit card game, and that is the climbing the credit card ladder video topic. I will admit that it is a creative concept, but that concept is seriously flawed if it is taken literally. So as a credit card enthusiast myself who tries to keep things as straightforward and truthful as I possibly can, I am compelled to make a video to offer a different perspective on the so-called credit card ladder. First off, I will briefly explain what is a credit card ladder, then share 4 weaknesses with climbing the credit card ladder, then finally talk about the truth that nobody wants to admit. So sit back, drop a like for the YouTube algorithm if you find this video to be useful, and subscribe to the channel if you want to hear more from me in the future. So what is the credit card ladder? Essentially, it is a tiered system that sorts credit cards into 5 different levels, sometimes 6, that's really organized based upon the annual fee of the credit card, with a little bit of it being organized based upon a credit level rating, and I'll get into that a little later on in this video. So when you look at the credit card ladder, what you are going to see at the bottom tier are the beginner credit cards, such as the secured credit cards and student credit cards, really those credit cards that are relatively easy to be approved for. The top level of the ladder is reserved for those credit cards that typically require an invitation for you to be able to apply for those credit cards, such as the very popular Amex Centurion card, which is commonly referred to as the Black Card, not to be confused with the MasterCard Black Card by Luxury Card. So the basic concept of the credit card ladder is that you start at the bottom tier and you move through each tier in chronological order to get to the top of the ladder, which for the majority of the population, myself included, you'll probably never get to the top of the ladder. And for those in the points and miles community, you probably don't want to get to the top of the credit card ladder because they aren't known to be strong point earning credit cards, and they typically don't come with a welcome offer. At least the last time I checked, they didn't have a welcome offer associated with those credit cards. In my opinion, the credit card ladder is really only good for that very first level, which is what I refer to as the beginner tier of credit cards, because for the general public, when you try to get your first credit card, it is a bit confusing. There is a plethora of options of credit cards available, but the truth of the matter is, when you're new to credit, you most likely won't be approved for the majority of those credit cards that are on the market, or I should say the majority of the good credit cards that are on the market. So the credit card ladder is very useful to pointing beginners to those entry-level credit cards that they have a higher chance of receiving an approval, rather than doing what I did over a decade ago and blindly applying for credit cards that I just couldn't qualify for, mainly due to my lack of credit history. So pointing people in the right direction for applying for student credit cards like the Capital One Saver One for students, or beginner credit cards like the Chase Freedom Rise, or some of the secured credit cards on the market such as the Capital One Quicksilver Secured. Quick note here, just to make sure you apply for the Quicksilver that doesn't have an annual fee, because Capital One has like 5 versions of the Quicksilver credit card. One of them being the Quicksilver Student that isn't even advertised on the main Quicksilver webpage. But anyway, this information is useful and can save people a lot of time, stress, and heartache, and help them to stay away from the annual fee credit cards when getting your first credit card. Believe me, you don't want to start building your credit history with an annual fee credit card, because those are typically the credit cards that will end up being canceled in the future if you aren't getting value from them. And believe me, you want to avoid canceling your very first credit card. Now, this is something that the credit card ladder videos tend to completely ignore, and that is limited time welcome offers take precedent over the ladder system almost 100% of the time, with the main exception being if you are at the beginner credit card level, then you're most likely locked up from qualifying for these offers until you build up your credit score at least a little bit so that you can be able to be approved for these credit cards. So I'll use myself as an example. My first credit card was the Discover It Cashback Student Credit Card, which came in this packaging. Yes, I still have it, and yes, it's still in good condition with the original paperwork. And I think it's unfortunate that you can't get this experience any longer. Anyway, that credit card was converted to the regular Discover It Cashback credit card once I informed Discover that I graduated from college. 5 years later, I applied for the Chase Freedom Unlimited credit card simply because, 1, I had a banking relationship with Chase. 2, there was the welcome offer of $150 after spending just $500 within the first 3 months of account opening. 3, it doesn't have an annual fee, which is a huge win for me, or at least back then. And 4, I would be able to receive 1.5% cashback on all of my purchases instead of the 1% cashback on my Discover Cashback credit card for those out of category purchases. Approximately 3 years after that, I opened the Sapphire Preferred specifically because of the welcome offer, which was temporarily at 100,000 Ultimate Reward points, which was the equivalent of $1,000 in cash back when that became available on the Sapphire Preferred. Now, the Sapphire Preferred just happened to be in Tier 3 on the credit card ladder system. However, if the Sapphire Reserve had received that offer at that time, I would have simply applied for this Sapphire Reserve, which is considered to be on tier level number 4, and then downgrade that Sapphire Reserve 1 year later to the Sapphire Preferred credit card, since the Sapphire Reserve isn't a good fit for me right now. So I'm currently at tier 3, and according to the credit card ladder, I should be looking to get credit cards that are at the next tier level, which is number 4. However, I wanted to complete my Chase Trifecta, and the Chase Freedom Flex also had a limited time welcome offer available that gave you 5% cash back on all grocery store purchases during the first year of account opening, I think up to $12,000 in spend. So instead of moving up to tier number 4, I moved back down to tier number 2 because I wanted that welcome offer and I wanted to complete my Chase Trifecta. Then my next card was the Amex Gold card. Why do you think? Because of an elevated limited time welcome offer of 90,000 membership reward points. So again, I didn't climb the ladder to tier number 4. I stayed within, or technically moved back to tier number 3. Then my next card I consider a tier 2 card was the Amex 2 Business Plus because I was ready to open up my first business credit card. And after that, I went for another credit card that I also consider tier number 2, and that is the Chase Inc. Business Cash. Now, why did I go for the Chase Inc. Business Cash credit card? Because it had a historically high limited time welcome offer of 90,000 Ultimate Reward points, or $900 in cash back. So far, I'm bouncing back and forth between tier 2 and tier 3 because of my personal credit card strategy, which included getting limited time welcome offers that I knew I'd be able to meet the minimum spend requirement within my monthly spending. Finally, I'll mention one more credit card that I consider in between tier 2 and tier 3, mainly because tier 3 cards typically come with a sizable welcome offer and an annual fee, but this particular credit card does not have an annual fee or welcome offer, but still gives access to transfer partners, and that is the Built MasterCard. And I specifically opened that card when I did because I am a renter and it made sense to have a card that will give me points for paying rent without a transaction fee. So as you can see, I followed the ladder a little bit, but ultimately, if I'm being completely honest, most of my moves have been due to the welcome offers that were available, with special emphasis on limited time welcome offers. So although according to the ladder, I should have aimed for a tier 4 credit card, I never got there until I opened up my 10th credit card, which was the Capital One Venture X. And after I opened up the Venture X, I stepped back down to tier number 2 by opening up the no annual fee Amex Hilton Honors credit card because of a limited time welcome offer. This one is a big one and one of the most important things for everyone to understand, and I talked about this a little bit in my previous video. The credit card ladder negates specific application rules that each credit card issuer may have. For example, when we take a look at tier number 3, we'll see the Chase Sapphire Preferred listed within that tier of credit cards. Then in tier number 4, we'll see the Sapphire Reserve listed within that tier of credit cards. However, what this does not take into consideration is that you cannot hold both of these Sapphire credit cards at the same time. If you get the Sapphire Preferred first, which is what most people will do who are following the credit card ladder system, and you decide, hey, you like the Chase ecosystem and you want to stay within the Chase ecosystem, then you may end up taking a step back to tier 2 because you'll either have to downgrade that Sapphire Preferred to one of the Chase Freedom cards, cancel that credit card altogether or upgrade the Sapphire Preferred to the Sapphire Reserve. And if you upgrade to the Sapphire Reserve, you'll no longer have a credit card in Tier 3, which is okay. In fact, the upgrade path would be better depending upon your velocity because you're only allowed to receive one Sapphire bonus every 48 months, which is another thing that just isn't taken into consideration with this credit card ladder system. If the welcome offer is higher on the Sapphire Reserve, then it may make sense to go after the Sapphire Reserve first, then downgrade to the Sapphire Preferred in year 2 if the Sapphire Reserve really isn't the right fit for you. Another thing is that some credit card issuers are really stingy. And again, I'll mention Capital One and how stingy they are with approving people for the Venture X credit card. I mentioned that the Venture X was my 10th credit card. However, it was my 7th personal credit card, and it took me 10 years to get to that number. Now, I'm not sure what level of velocity will trigger Capital One's system from completely locking you out from getting this credit card, but there are multiple content creators who cannot get approved for this credit card using their name, so they use their spouse's information to have a greater chance of being approved. So if you stay in Tier 2 and get multiple credit cards in that tier, then move up to Tier 3 and do the same thing getting multiple credit cards within that tier, you'll be putting yourself at a greater risk of possibly not being able to ever be approved for the Venture X credit card. Continuing on with the stingy nature of Capital One, this is another rule that hasn't been 100% vetted in the community, but according to Forbes.com, you may only be eligible to hold up to 5 cards from Capital One. However, this may vary depending on your credit history and the type of credit cards that you have from Capital One. The article mentions that you may be limited to 1 or 2 personal cards, but may be able to obtain more business credit cards from them. Again, I'm not 100% sure of this because there are data points out there with people who have more than 2 personal cards from Capital One. So it just seems that this rule applies differently depending on your credit history and your history with Capital One specifically. So since there is a risk that Capital One may not approve people for more than 2 personal credit cards, moving up each tier of the ladder with Capital One may not be the best strategy. So instead of climbing the ladder with Capital One, I'd recommend going after the most valuable cards before you accumulate too many of their credit cards and too many credit cards, period. I'd recommend focusing on the Saver One and Venture X, and that's of course after you get in with that beginner level credit card. This point is going to be pretty straightforward, and that is the credit card ladder is just way too general, and when you have something that tries to take a one-size-shoe-fits-all approach, it is going to be laced with flaws, with some of them being significant flaws like the ones that I've shared earlier on in this video. Because the approach is so general, it really doesn't take into account those situations where someone may be able to get much more value from Tier 3 credit cards or Tier 4 credit cards much earlier on than those who may get more value from the Tier 2 credit cards. For example, someone who travels several times per month and spends a sizable amount of cash on travel may get a ton of value from cards like the Sapphire Reserve, Amex Platinum, Venture X, and Altitude Reserve credit cards, and this can happen pretty early on in a person's life depending on what they're doing for work. In my last video, I shared that a person who travels with this frequency can easily earn nearly 200,000 membership reward points per year with the Amex Platinum based upon the average cost of travel in the United States. So an individual like that can miss out on a lot of value if they think that they need to work through Tier 2 and then Tier 3 in order to get to Tier 4 finally. Also, it may make more sense for a person to go from Tier 1 to Tier 3 if the Amex Gold card, for example, brings more value to them because they spend a lot on groceries and restaurants, and the available statement credits make sense for them, which then makes the Amex Gold card much more valuable than one of the no annual fee credit cards in Tier 2 because they can effectively receive positive net value from the Amex Gold card. These situations definitely occur, and this is the reason why I think that the only level that is truly important on the credit card ladder is that first tier level. So this section may ruffle some feathers within the credit card community, and I want to be clear, I am not sharing this to target anyone. This is just my honest, objective opinion, and it's okay if you don't agree with me. So all of the flaws that I shared earlier on in this video are pretty solid and arguably pretty significant when thinking about the concept of climbing the ladder. So why does this flawed concept continue to be regurgitated and pushed out to the community? I believe that there are two answers for this. My first answer is that these videos tend to perform very well. I believe that there is an example of this concept that's nearing 1 million views, which is awesome. Any video on YouTube that can amass nearly 1 million views is a significant accomplishment that I honestly hope to achieve one day. That would be pretty great. But the fact is, these videos can perform extremely well, which means that it earns a pretty sizable amount of YouTube ad revenue and can greatly help with growing our channels. Answer number two is the potential of conversions or sales with those personal affiliate links that do wonders with helping to grow our YouTube income for our YouTube channels. Listen, there's no shame in the game with being truthful about this, and there's no shame in those doing what they have to do to make a living. So this video concept allows for a relatively creative way for content creators to talk about several credit cards within one video that most likely or has a good potential to get a lot of views and lead to some or potentially a lot of affiliate link conversions, especially since these videos have the potential to gain a lot of views over time. I personally feel that the climbing the credit card ladder concept can be put to rest because I believe that there is another concept in the community that works much better than this one and still accomplishes the same goals while mitigating the serious flaws nestled within the concept of climbing the credit card ladder. And that concept that I like is the ranking credit cards in tier levels that are typically color coded in the thumbnail. You'll see an S tier in red, the A tier in like an orange color. The B tier is typically golden yellow, C would be yellow, D may be green. I think that simply getting rid of the ladder and replacing it with the color coded tier system and getting rid of the climbing the ladder language gets the message across to the viewers, and they won't feel compelled to move up the ladder in chronological order, because let's face it, that is a flawed strategy, and I don't think a lot of people in the community even follow that. I think most people go after limited time welcome offers because that's where you amass the most amount of points. But again, starting at that base level where you're going after those very beginner credit cards that just may not have a welcome offer, that's necessary to get your foot wet in the game. And after that, once you're good with using your credit cards and good with credit, you're gonna do fine. And climbing this ladder, in my opinion, just kind of doesn't make sense. Anyway, that's enough talking about the credit card ladder concept, but if you happen to be a beginner in the credit card game, I recommend watching this video next, where I share credit card tips that can help you from screwing up your, I'll just use the word strategy. You can see the title there. With that said, you stayed through to the end, so come on over and get your high five. In my opinion, the credit card ladder is believe me, you don't want to start your... My first credit card was the Discover Cashback. Oops, I'll be right back. Now, I'm not sure what level of velocity will trigger Capital One's. May get a ton of value from cards like this chest. Blah, blah, blah. All right, let's go.